The storage room reeked of rust and fear, not just the stale metallic scent rising from the old chains mottled with corrosion, or the dense, frigid air pressing in from the rough concrete walls, but the silence itself, a thick, suffocating silence that made her feel as if someone were watching, lurking just beyond the veil of darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a faint clatter of chains echoed through the murky space. Above her, a bare bulb swayed in a slow, uneven rhythm, casting long, smeared shadows across the cold concrete floor like restless ghosts. She hung suspended in the air, her wrists swollen, raw, and bleeding from hours of grinding against metal restraints. Her breaths came in shallow, broken wisps that lost themselves in the icy air. "Just kill me quickly," she whispered, her voice scraping through her throat like a dull blade, brittle and spent. The footsteps that had been pacing around her finally stopped. Slow, heavy, the kind of steps taken by a man who never hurried, because the world itself always waited for him. "Look at me!" His voice slid through the darkness like silk, but sharp like shattered glass, laced with a soft Italian undertone that sounded almost poetic, yet held a chill capable of pricking bone. She did not look. She could not. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor beneath her, where a puddle was spreading slowly. Was it rainwater or blood? She could no longer tell. I said, "Look at me." This time it wasn't a request. It was a command, against every instinct screaming inside her to bow, to disappear, to shrink as small as humanly possible. She lifted her head, and he was there. Luca Moretti, the shadow of Brooklyn, standing in this filthy, decaying place, yet looking as though he'd stepped out of a high-fashion magazine cover. His charcoal gray suit was immaculate down to the last thread, untouched by dust or grime. His dark hair was slicked back neatly, and his sun-tanned skin seemed to absorb the cold light and soften it. But it was his eyes the color of thick, black coffee, deep, magnetic, unreadable, that kept her from looking away, even as her body trembled from exhaustion. She had seen photographs of him before in news articles, in intelligence reports, in grainy security camera stills. Luca Moretti, the man whose name made senators in Washington whisper prayers under their breath. 36 years old, Italian descent, and the quiet ruler of nearly half of Brooklyn, commanding a power no one dared to challenge. Now he stood inches away from her, studying her with the detached curiosity of a man examining a work of art, deciding whether it should be preserved or destroyed. "What is your name?" he asked. Something in his voice told her this wasn't the first time he had posed the question. "Does it matter?" she answered, shocked at the firmness still left in her words. Good. If she had to die, she would not die trembling. A faint smile ghosted across his lips, barely visible, yet enough to transform his entire face, beautiful in a ruthless, unsettling way. "Everything matters, Bella. Your name, how you got here, and why my men thought they had the right to take you without asking me first." The way he spoke, gentle, almost conversational, twisted something deep in her gut, birthing a new kind of fear. She had assumed Luca had ordered her capture. Now she wasn't sure. And somehow, that uncertainty was even more terrifying. "Elena," she said, because at this point, she had nothing left to lose. "Elena Navarro," he nodded slowly, as though confirming something he already knew. Then, with a calmness that made her blood run cold, he pulled a folding knife from inside his suit. The blade flicked open with a muted metallic glint. "Please," she murmured. The tough facade she had maintained shattered in a breath. "If you're going to kill me, just do it quickly." But instead of moving toward her throat, he stepped behind her. The cold blade touched her wrist. A soft slicing sound cut through the silence. And then she fell. Her arms collided with her sides as blood rushed back in a hot, stinging wave from her shoulders to her fingertips, leaving her unable to control them. But before she could collapse onto the floor, strong arms caught her, steadying her, drawing her into the faint, intoxicating scent of expensive cologne, mixed with something darker, more dangerous. "Easy," he murmured, near her ear. One arm braced around her waist, keeping her upright. "You're safe now." She let out a dry, painful laugh, the sound cracking like something breaking inside her. "Safe? Are you joking? I'm standing in a warehouse with a man who probably has more blood on his hands than a trauma surgeon." He tilted his head, that faint, fleeting smile returning. "At least you're honest about what you think of me. But yes, You're safe. At least from me. She wanted to push him away, to carve distance between herself and this man, who radiated danger like heat from an open flame. But her legs were limp, disconnected from her will. And strangely, she found herself looking at him, truly looking for something. A lie, a warning, a threat. But instead, she saw something else, something she couldn't name. All she knew was that the fear in her heart, for the first time in a very long time, was no longer the only thing she felt. If you've made it this far and feel this story stirring something inside you, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like and share this video so we can continue bringing heartfelt stories every single day. And if you don't mind, would you tell me where you're watching from? Leave a comment below and let us know where in the world this story has reached. We truly treasure every word you share with us. Elena was still reeling when he eased his arm away from her waist, letting her lean against the rusted steel column by the wall. She clutched her shoulders, her fingers numb, as though they belonged to someone else. Her eyes never left the strange man in front of her, still unable to understand why he had appeared at the exact moment he did, why he had cut her down instead of tightening the noose the way the rest of the world once had. Luca did not rush to explain, nor did he ask another question. He simply moved slowly around the room, his hand gliding over the dusty metal tables, his eyes sweeping through every shadowed corner as if searching for something, or perhaps assessing the damage someone had inflicted on her. The air thickened again with that choking silence, broken only by the faint swaying of chains like the lingering echo of a nightmare. "How long have you been held?" Luca asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, yet heavy enough to fill the room. Elena shook her head. "I don't know. 1 day, 2, maybe 3. I can't remember." She turned away, avoiding his gaze. "You seem overly interested, Luca Moretti. Why? Afraid of trouble?" He looked back at her, the flickering bulb casting erratic light across his sharply carved, expressionless face. "I care about what happens on my territory." Elena let out a rasping laugh, the sound rough like gravel scraping her throat. "Your territory? You think all of Brooklyn belongs to you? It doesn't have to be all of Brooklyn, only this block, and my men did this to you, without my permission." He said it the way someone might remark that a subordinate had used the wrong coffee mug, not as if he were talking about a woman being strung up, beaten, and nearly left to die. "Maybe you should reconsider how you train your people," Elena replied, forcing sarcasm to cover the trembling beneath her skin. Luca showed no reaction. He simply watched her for a few more seconds, then suddenly shrugged off his outer coat and tossed it to her. "You need to cover yourself." She caught it, though her hand still shook violently. The coat was too large, carrying the faint scent of tobacco and expensive cologne woven into the thick wool, and for a moment it offered her a strange warmth in the steel cutting cold. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice tight. "If you weren't the one who took me, then why are you here? Why did you save me?" Luca didn't answer immediately. He walked to an old chair, brushed off the dust, and sat as if he had the whole night to talk. The light cast shadows over his face, making his eyes glimmer like embers buried beneath ash. "Because I did not order this," he said. "And because anyone who lays a hand on a stranger within my domain without permission is declaring war." Elena lifted her head. For the first time, her eyes carried a trace of uncertainty. "War? Against who?" "I'm just an ordinary woman. No one declares war over a nameless pawn." Luca tilted his head, watching her as though waiting for her to admit the truth. "No one kidnaps an ordinary woman, throws her into a cold warehouse, beats her, then strings her up like this, without a reason." He pulled out a cigar, then slipped it back into his pocket. "I think you are someone far more important than you pretend to be." Elena clutched the edges of the coat, her mind spinning. She had run, she had hidden, she had tried to become invisible for 3 long years, yet they still found her, and now a powerful Mafia boss was reading her like a page of an open book. "I'm not important," she said softly. "I'm just someone who ran, and clearly failed." Luca remained silent. He didn't push her to say more, but his eyes, steadfast, observing every shift in her expression, told her he was memorizing everything. She wasn't sure if he believed her, but she knew one thing for certain. He knew far more than he let on. "His name is Victor, isn't it?" Luca asked, his voice suddenly dropping lower. Elena froze. Her lips pressed together as old fear dragged her mind back to dark rooms, chains, and the hiss of hot metal branding flesh. "Yes," she whispered, as if speaking his name might summon him from the shadows. "He's still alive?" "He doesn't die that easily," Elena said, eyes fixed on nothing. Luca nodded, as though confirming a critical piece of a puzzle. Then he stood and walked toward the door. "Let's go." "Go where?" "Out of here, before Victor's men come back for you. And I doubt they'll be any kinder the second time." Elena didn't move. "I don't know if I can trust you." Luca turned back, his eyes dark but no longer as cold as before. "I don't need you to trust me. I just need you to stand up. Trust can come later." And in that moment, she understood she had no other choice. Yet strangely, beneath the fog of pain, she heard something faint and familiar inside herself, the sound of hope. Elena dragged her feet behind Luca, her legs still numb as if detached from her body. They moved through a narrow hallway, thick with dust and damp, past a creaking metal door, and out into the parking lot behind the warehouse. The New York night hit her like a freezing slap, but it carried with it the fragile whisper of freedom she had lost so long ago. A black SUV sat waiting, its engine still warm. Luca opened the door, letting her climb in first. She sat in silence, still clutching his coat, her gaze locked on the dashboard, though her mind drifted through a labyrinth of unanswered questions. Why had he helped her? How did he know Victor's name? And why did everything feel as though it had been set in motion long before she arrived? The car had been moving for several blocks before Luca finally spoke, his voice steady and low. "I need to know exactly what happened to you." Elena bit her lip, turning her face toward the window. "There's nothing to tell." Luca didn't respond right away. He turned into a narrow alley between two old brick buildings, letting the SUV roll into darkness before he cut the engine. For a moment, only the ticking of the cooling metal and the sound of his quiet breathing filled the space. "I won't force you," he said, his eyes fixed on her. "But if I don't know what's happening, I can't protect you." Those two words, "protect you," constricted something inside her chest. Others had said those words once. She had believed them. And in the end, they had left her with burns across her skin and scars carved deep in her mind. "I don't need your protection," she said, her voice low, brittle. "I just want to be left alone." Luca exhaled, a long breath that sounded like he was weighing his next step. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping further. "Elena, there is something I need to see, to understand." She turned toward him, wary. "See what?" "Your back." She went rigid, every muscle locked. She gripped the edge of the coat, her breath catching. "No." "I know." Victor marked his victims. His voice wasn't cold as she expected. Instead, there was something almost gentle in it. "I need to know what he did to you." Elena shook her head, each motion like holding together the last pieces of herself. "If you see it, you'll know, and I don't want anyone to know." Luca stayed silent for a moment, then opened his door and stepped outside. He walked around, opened her door, and lowered himself to one knee beside her as if refusing to stand above her. "I don't want to turn you into a display. I just want to understand, so I can help you." Elena stared at him. Her eyes had run dry long ago, but something cracked behind them. She didn't know why she trusted him. Maybe it was the way he spoke, or maybe she was simply too tired to keep hiding. Slowly, she turned her back and pulled the coat from her shoulders. The streetlight filtered through the open car door, illuminating her bare skin and the burned-in brand across her back, a blackened scar that looked ancient and cursed. A serpent coiled around a withered flower, its jaws sunk into the stem. A branding iron's kiss, ragged, brutal, impossible to erase. Luca said nothing. For a long moment, he simply breathed. Then he rose, pulled the coat back up over her shoulders with his own hands, slow and careful, as though covering something sacred. "What do they call it?" he asked. Elena clenched her fists. "The serpent's kiss. They used it to mark the special girls." "How did you escape?" 1 year after being sold. "I tricked one of them. I killed him." Luca watched her, unblinking. "You survived something no one should survive. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous." Elena lifted her head. For the first time, light flickered in her eyes. "What do you want from me?" Luca didn't dance around the truth. "Help me end Victor. I've tracked him for years. But you're the only one who ever escaped him and lived. You know how he thinks. You can help me find him and destroy everything he's built." Elena stayed silent for a long time. Then she whispered, barely audible, "And if I help you, what do you promise me?" Luca didn't hesitate. "Freedom, no strings, no debts. And if everything fails, I'll keep your original request." Elena raised her gaze. "Kill me quickly." Luca nodded. "If by then, that's still what you want." In the quiet darkness, Elena closed her eyes. And for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel alone. Elena sat quietly in the car, her hand still gripping the edges of Luca's coat, as if letting go would cause every truth she had buried to spill out uncontrollably. Luca didn't push her. He started the engine, guiding them out of the dark alley and onto the empty Brooklyn streets. When the steady hum of the motor finally softened the chaos inside her mind, Elena spoke, her voice hoarse, each word pulled from a place deep and shadowed. "I joined the FBI when I was 23. I came from the south side of the Bronx, a place where, if you didn't find a way out early, you eventually disappeared into dust. I wasn't smarter than anyone else, but I was good at surviving. And they needed someone like that. When I was 24, I was recruited into a special unit investigating transnational human trafficking, a wide, intricate network stretching from Europe to the United States. Viktor Kovalenko was one of its major links. He never showed up directly in the documents, but every trail led back to him. I volunteered for the undercover mission." She fell silent for a moment, her gaze drifting into the distance through the windshield, back toward the dark room where everything had begun to splinter. "I convinced my superiors to let me infiltrate the network. A false identity, a fabricated story, a Latina girl kidnapped from Texas, passed through several traffickers, finally landing inside Victor's system. We thought we were prepared. I carried equipment, a locator beacon, escape plans. I was trained to endure, but no one taught me how to endure being forgotten." Her voice dropped to a murmur. "I went in, and at first, everything followed the plan. I recorded information, captured audio, sent regular reports. But after 2 months, I was exposed. They found a recording chip hidden under the insole of my shoe. Someone on our team leaked something. I don't know who. I never had the time to find out. Then came 6 days without light. No food. No human kindness. Victor never touched me himself. He ordered. He watched. And he laughed when they heated the branding iron." Luca looked toward her, but Elena didn't turn back. She continued speaking steadily, as if stopping meant she would never be able to speak again. "After that, they transferred me to another trafficker, and then another, and another, 3 groups in total. In each place, I left a scar. Not on my body, but in my memory. I memorized faces, voices, habits. I memorized how they organized, transported, erased traces. That was the only thing that kept me alive, believing everything I endured would matter someday. And then one morning, I killed a guard when he was drunk. I took his keys, his gun, and ran. No one chased me. Maybe they thought I'd die in the woods, but I didn't. I walked for 3 days across empty fields, slept in drainage pipes, ate scraps. I found a gas station and called a number that used to be an FBI support line. No one answered. Elena turned to Luca, her eyes red but dry. No one answered. I called again. And that time, a stranger picked up. A man who had no idea who I was. I repeated the safety password again and again. Finally, he said, "There's no one by that name in the system." I had been erased, disappeared, as if I had never existed. Luca's grip tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Elena lowered her head. I built myself a new identity, moved from state to state, waitressing, hauling boxes, washing dishes. For 3 years, I didn't exist to any agency. I lived in the shadows not because I was afraid, but because I no longer trusted anyone, until today, when I was dragged back to where it all began. "And you showed up." Luca nodded slowly, as if storing every word inside an unseen drawer in his memory. "I understand. Not because I went through the same thing, but because I, too, have been betrayed. No one deserves what you endured." Elena said nothing more. They continued driving in silence, 2 strangers, two shattered pasts, sitting side by side as the car moved through a city unaware that a quiet war was beginning to stir in its deepest shadows. The SUV glided across the Manhattan Bridge as dawn began to lighten the sky. The city lights faded beneath the cold gray of early morning, and the skyscrapers emerged like ghosts keeping watch. Elena leaned her head against the window, eyes closed but mind unsettled. The memories she had just spoken aloud felt freshly unearthed from a pit, hastily buried, heavy, smoldering, freezing. Luca said nothing for the rest of the drive. He drove with the patient calm of a man long accustomed to silence. When the car stopped in front of a glass building on the west side of Brooklyn, Elena straightened, suspicion flickering in her eyes. No sign, no guards, only a discreet underground entrance watched over by tight security cameras. Luca handed her a keycard. She didn't ask questions. She followed him through a long hallway, up an elevator, until they stepped into a large room lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. The penthouse was unnervingly quiet. No clutter, no dust, nothing out of place, everything arranged with meticulous precision. She stood in the center of the room, her arms still wrapped around her body as if shielding herself. Luca poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. "You can stay here for now. I've had it checked. No surveillance, no tracking. You'll be safe." Elena held the glass but didn't drink. "I never said—" I agreed. Luca sat across from her, eyes steady on hers. "You told me a story no one else has ever heard, not because you trust me, but because you're too exhausted to hold it in. But I think deep down, you know I'm not like the people who betrayed you." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Something in his gaze unsettled her, not because it was dangerous, but because it was too open. As if taking one more step toward him meant crossing a line she could never uncross. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice less sharp but still cold. Luca leaned back, fingers interlaced. "I want Viktor Kovalenko wiped off the criminal map of New York. Not just him, but his entire network, his men, his suppliers, the politicians behind him. I know he's bringing in a large shipment soon. I don't have the when or where. But you can help me. I'm not an agent anymore," Elena said. "I have no authority, no intel, nothing. You have memory," Luca replied instantly. "You lived inside that world. You understand how they move, how they think. You have something no intelligence file can offer: experience." Elena rolled the glass between her palms. She wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed for her to run again, to disappear again. But this time was different. Viktor had found her, which meant no matter where she fled, he would find her again. And next time, Luca might not be there to cut her down. "I'll do it," she said softly but clearly. "But I have conditions." Luca tilted his head. "Tell me. No lies, no hidden information. I need to know every step, every plan, every risk." "Agreed. If I say stop, you stop. I'm not bait. I'm not anyone's pawn. You're a partner, not a tool. And if everything falls apart," she lifted her gaze, her eyes sharp as tempered steel, "you must keep your promise." "I remember," Luca said quietly. "Kill me quickly." They held each other's stare in silence. No handshake, no contract, no oath. Only an agreement between two people betrayed down to the bone. And for the first time, neither of them stepped back. Elena set the glass on the table. "Then let's begin." "Before I change my mind," Luca nodded and stood. "We already have." She didn't ask what he meant, because deep inside, she knew he was right. The first step had already been taken, not toward safety, but toward confronting the monster she once believed she had left behind. Dawn had not yet broken when Elena found herself sitting in a dim room deep in the basement of the compound Luca used as a temporary command center. On the large screen before her glowed a detailed map of Brooklyn, red dots blinking steadily, each one marking a location Luca suspected was tied to Viktor's trafficking operations. Tommy Russo, a broad-shouldered man with a thick Brooklyn accent and a smile that appeared only on rare occasions, stood beside her holding a tablet, his eyes fixed on the screen. He was Luca's right hand, and the one person Elena had yet to decide whether she could trust or keep at a distance. "They just moved the shipment from the old place to a garage in South Williamsburg," Tommy said, pointing to an old building near the riverbank. "We've been tracking it for weeks, but we held off because we weren't sure what they were holding." Elena narrowed her eyes. She recognized the name on the display: Richmond Auto Parts. a cover operation once used by one of the trafficking groups she herself had been moved through. Her hands tightened. "That's a transfer point," she said. "They don't keep people there long, usually just a few hours to switch vehicles, split groups, or shake off anyone watching. If you wait any longer, they'll disappear." Luca, standing behind her in silent observation, gave a single nod when he heard her confirmation. "Tommy, get the team ready. Tonight." Elena turned to him. "I'm going with you." Tommy raised a brow, ready to object, but Luca spoke first. "All right." She blinked, surprised at how easily he agreed, but said nothing more. When night fell, the 6-person team climbed into the vehicles, no music, no conversation, only the tense quiet of people who knew the danger ahead. Elena wore black, her hair tucked beneath a cap, her expression sharp, as if she were slipping back into a role she had once lived for an entire year. They stopped 2 blocks from the garage. Tommy signaled for the group to split into formation. Elena and Luca moved together through the narrow alleys thick with the smell of motor oil and smoke. From behind a stack of shipping containers, they could see the garage lit up. 3 men stood outside smoking, one of them talking on a phone. The rolling gate was halfway down, and from inside came flickering lights and the faint thump of music noise meant to distract any curious neighbors. Luca whispered, "No sound. Capture alive." Elena nodded. Her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from anger, because those faces, those bodies, that casual way they guarded the place as if it were nothing more than a night shift they were familiar. She zeroed in on one of the men. Tall, buzz-cut, eyes cold. He smoked like nothing mattered in the world more than finishing his cigarette. She recognized his posture. He had once transported her from one point to another. He had tightened plastic restraints on her wrists until her skin split. He was alive and free. Moments later, Tommy's team emerged from 2 sides. 2 of the men were subdued quickly. The 3rd managed to draw a gun, but Luca kicked it out of his hand before he could fire. Elena watched in stillness as the entire scuffle ended in under a minute. No one died. Luca had kept his word. No killing, only capture. The men were tied, wrists pinned behind their backs, dragged out by 3 of Tommy's crew. One of them, still dazed, kept shouting, "Who the hell are you people?" "No," one answered. While Tommy swept the inside of the garage, Elena stepped toward the buzz-cut man. He looked up, squinting. Recognition hit him. His face went pale. "You," he stammered. "You were dead. Not that easy," she murmured. "You're going to tell me the next location. And if you lie, I'll let someone else handle you. If you tell the truth, you'll only lose a few teeth." He swallowed hard, lips trembling. Okay, I'll talk. Just don't send me back to Victor." Luca stepped beside her, his voice cold as steel. "We won't, but if you hold back even one detail, she'll decide what happens to you." The man dropped his head and shakily recited the address of another warehouse near the southern docks. Elena stored every word. The trembling inside her had shifted into something else entirely. Control. For the first time in 3 years, she was the one asking questions, and they were the ones answering. The basement room beneath Luca's temporary headquarters hummed with the soft clicking of the recording system. Elena sat motionless before a row of speakers and monitors, the dim light casting sharp shadows along her tense features, illuminating the faint scars that still lingered on her wrists after years of running. Tommy stood behind her with the control board in hand, glancing at Luca for direction. Luca nodded. "Play it." The audio began, crackling at first before sharpening. It was a recording pulled from the buzz-cut man's phone, an exchange between him and another voice at an unknown location. At first, it was mere logistical chatter, buried under the rumble of truck engines. But at the 30th second, when the clearer voice cut through, Elena froze, her eyes shut tight, her hands gripping the chair as though she meant to crush its padded frame. That voice, that dry, knife-edged timbre, the cold cadence slicing each word. She didn't need a face, no confirmation. It was Victor. There was no mistaking it. Make sure that girl never shows up again. I don't want to hear her breathing. If she's back, I want her head before the press gets wind of anything. Elena's eyes snapped open, her pupils wide, her chest rising sharply as if she'd just taken a hit to the ribs. She remembered that voice whispering in her ear the night her world collapsed. "Do you know why I won't kill you, Elena?" Victor had said. Because you need to stay alive long enough to understand what it feels like when no one believes you anymore. Now, 3 years later, that same voice carried the same poison, unchanged and unmistakable. She turned to Luca, her gaze no longer trembling but resolute. "It's him, I'm sure. He's still here. He never left the city." Luca nodded, as though he had been waiting exactly for that confirmation. "Good. That's all I needed to move from suspicion to action." Tommy stopped the audio, leaving the room steeped in taut silence. Luca stepped closer to Fast. "Elena," his voice lower. "Do you want to hear the rest?" He mentioned someone else. "Anton." Elena frowned. The name had never appeared in any file she knew. "Who is Anton?" Luca crossed his arms, his expression darkening. "The man coordinating the new gathering points near the southern docks. He's very discreet, never shows his face. Could be a new link. Or the replacement Victor brought in after you." Elena's hands tightened. The thought of someone else being forced into the place she once existed twisted something in her chest, but it also stoked a rising fire. "I want to find him, Anton. If we get him, I'll make him tell me where Victor is." Luca nodded. "We've been tracking shipments moving from Jersey into Brooklyn through Red Hook. Anton switches drivers constantly, but one name appeared 3 times in 7 days: Frankie Delgado. A middleman, prior convictions." Tommy pulled up a traffic cam still of a silver truck, with a fake shipping company logo parked by the docks. Elena stared at the license plate. "If I were him, I'd test the route with a small shipment first. If no one reacts, then bring in the big one." Luca's smile was faint and cold. "We'll let him think no one is watching. But next time, you're riding with Frankie." Elena turned to him, her eyes steady. "I'll get on that truck, but if Victor is there, I want to be the first one to speak to him." "I don't doubt that," Luca replied, their eyes locked, needing no further words. The ghost in that voice was no longer part of her past. He was alive, breathing, still the beast in human skin she once believed she'd left behind. But this time, Elena wasn't running. She would go back, and she would not look away when he looked at her again. Luca's penthouse was bathed in a soft wash of warm gold from the ceiling lights, reflecting off the clear glass walls that overlooked Brooklyn's fading skyline. Elena sat in the armchair near the window, a glass of wine in her hand that had long since lost its warmth, untouched as she stared into the dark horizon. Her body still trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline that had yet to settle after hearing Victor's voice again. Luca stood by the small bar counter, poured himself another whiskey, then approached her, remaining silent for a long moment before taking the chair across from hers. She lifted her eyes to him, noticing that the sharp glint he always carried was gone, replaced by something softer, almost honest. He set the glass on the table between them and spoke, his voice low and deliberate, as if every word passed through a quiet war behind his eyes before reaching his lips. "You told me about your past. You think I'm an outsider, a mafia boss who happened to show up at the right moment. But I carry scars too. We're not as different as you think, Elena." She watched him without speaking. She waited. "I was born in Naples," Luca continued, his gaze drifting into the distance as though he could see through the glass and into a world long lost. "My father was a lawyer. My mother taught music. They weren't criminals. They wanted me far from anything involving gangs, power, dirty money. And for the first 14 years of my life, I believed they could protect me from everything." He paused, his lips pressed into a tight line. "Until that night, a group of men broke into our home. They were after a document my father refused to hand over to a high-ranking member of the Camorra. I don't know what was in it. I only remember the smell of blood, and the sound of my mother crying when they dragged her out of the room." Elena's fingers tightened around the armrest, not from curiosity, but because she already sensed where this could lead. Luca's voice didn't change. He spoke as if reciting a book he had memorized down to every painful word. "I hid under the bed, silent, still. I heard everything. My father begging, my mother pleading, and then the gunshots." He lifted the sleeve of his shirt, revealing a long, faded scar running from his wrist to his elbow. "One of them came back to check the room. He saw me. I ran. He fired. The bullet grazed my arm, tore the skin open, but I kept running. I didn't stop until a neighbor caught me on the street." Elena stared at the scar, saying nothing. but her eyes softened just a fraction as the space between them seemed to shrink by one careful breath. Luca lowered his sleeve again. After that night, I stopped believing in justice. The police arrived 2 hours later. No one was arrested. No one claimed responsibility. The case was closed for lack of evidence. I was sent to America to live with my uncle. He was the one who taught me that the law only matters when it sits in the hands of the powerful. And you chose this path, Elena murmured. I didn't choose it, Luca replied, his voice darker. It was inevitable. If you grow up in a world where murderers sit at the highest tables, you understand. I'm not in the Mafia because I enjoy it. I'm here because I refuse to stand on the sidelines. But you still kill, Elena said, meeting his eyes. Luca nodded without a hint of apology. I kill, but I choose who I kill. And Victor is one of them. She leaned back, her gaze steady on him. In that moment, between two people whose pasts had been carved open by violence, there was no judgment left, only understanding and the quiet acknowledgement that they were both shaped by wounds no one could undo. Elena raised her glass, tapping it lightly against his. To the scars, she said. Luca clinked his glass in return. And to the ones who made them. They drank not to escape, but because both understood that tomorrow would begin a hunt neither could walk away from. 2 days after that late-night confession, Elena stood in a dimly lit room, illuminated only by the glow of a large monitor at the DESA, a center of the command base. Cool blue lines from the satellite tracking interface washed over her face, sharpening every tense line in her expression. Tommy stood beside her, scrolling through a stream of data from the tracking device they had planted on Frankie Delgado's truck after the failed negotiation the night before. Luca stood behind them, arms crossed, silent as a shadow. They had let Frankie go on purpose, not interfering, but attaching a micro-tracker beneath the vehicle. Elena had been the one to propose it, and now all eyes were on her as the screen displayed an unusual route, deviating from the official shipping path and veering into a narrow side road near Red Hook. Frankie had stopped there for 19 minutes, long enough to unload something, exchange instructions, or receive new orders before circling back south. Why not deliver straight to the main warehouse? Why stop in a place that quiet? Tommy muttered as he zoomed into the map and pulled traffic footage from a nearby street cam. Elena stared at the blurry image of a low tin-roofed building sitting on the river's edge. Because it's a secondary point. They never keep shipments there long, just enough to divide or redirect. Luca spoke without lifting his eyes from the coordinates. If that's the spot, we need to know what it connects to. Elena sat down and typed rapidly. She pulled property records from Red Hook spanning the last 3 years. One name appeared 3 times, East Coast Industrial Holdings, a shell company previously suspected of laundering money through the ports. She tilted her head, murmuring to herself. I've heard that name. Victor mentioned it. Once, when I was still held in Queens. He said it was a safe point. Tommy immediately dug through the files. Registered in Delaware. No listed owner, but the tenant listed on the lease is a secondary name, Anton Savich. The room fell silent. Elena closed her eyes. That name hit like a signal flare. For the first time, every thread converged. Anton, the new coordinator. Victor, the man behind him. And now, a clear staging location. Luca pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Get the team ready. Keep a wide perimeter. Eyes on the site 24 hours. If anyone leaves, we need to know where they go, who they meet, what they're carrying. Elena's gaze remained fixed on the map. In her mind, every memory twisted into place. The old warehouses she'd been moved through, the men speaking Russian mixed with Italian, the shipments disguised as household goods, mattresses, industrial equipment. She remembered the damp smell, the rotting wood, the unmistakable scent of fear. And now, everything pointed to a tin-roofed building no one ever noticed. If we're right, she said quietly, tomorrow night they'll bring a major shipment there. Victor never hands big shipments to new coordinators without testing the routes first, and he always waits until Friday. Luca nodded. Then we have only one night to prepare. Tommy checked weapons, earpieces, backup batteries. We take him down there? Elena shook her head. Not yet. If we strike now, he'll vanish again. Victor never shows up unless he's certain he's already won. We have to make him believe he's winning. Luca glanced at her, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. You want to be the bait. I'm the only bait he hasn't finished, she said. This time, I'll make him come for me. No one laughed. No one argued. They all understood. The plan had already begun. And none of them, not even Elena, would sleep the next night. The meeting room beneath the safe house was dimmed to a muted glow, leaving only the light from the monitors to cast pale reflections across the exposed concrete walls. On the table lay a detailed map of Red Hook, marked with transport routes, traffic camera placements, wind directions, and even the docking schedule of cargo ships down to the hour. Luca stood in the center, his eyes sweeping over every detail with cold precision, while Tommy double-checked the support team roster. Elena leaned against the edge of the table, her hair pulled back tightly, her gaze stripped of all hesitation. She didn't need more time to steel herself. She had lived in the heart of the storm too long to still be afraid. "We let me appear on the surveillance cameras near the transfer point. Then I move into the East warehouse, the one they used 3 years ago," Elena said, her fingers tapping an uneven rhythm on the tabletop. "They'll assume I'm trying to retrieve something. Maybe data, maybe a person. That will force Anton to alert Victor." Luca nodded. "And Victor never tolerates someone returning to his territory without his permission. He'll react." Tommy leaned back in his chair, one leg crossed over the other. "The question is how he reacts. Does he send someone to tail her, or clean up the problem right away?" Elena turned to him, her eyes sharp as a blade. "I'd bet he'll want to handle it himself. He wants to see me afraid. Last time, I ran without looking back. This time, I'll make him look at me." Luca walked over and sat beside her, his voice low and steady. "If you do that, he'll send people to capture you. Not to kill you, he'll want to bring you in. He wants control." "I know," Elena said. "And I'll let them take me." Tommy almost jumped from his chair. "No, absolutely not. You just escaped these people, and now you want to let yourself get caught again? You think this is a movie?" Luca raised a hand, signaling him to stop. He looked Elena directly in the eyes. "Are you sure?" Elena nodded. "If we want Victor to show himself, he has to think he's winning. If I disappear again, if word gets out that I'm being held somewhere, he'll come in person to finish it. He never delegates that kind of satisfaction." Luca remained silent for a few seconds. "We'll need concealed tech, something subdermal. The signal will be weak, but it'll hold for a few hours. That's all I need, long enough for you to find me when he comes. And if they separate you from the device, I won't let them. If I lose contact for more than 5 minutes, you attack." The room fell into heavy silence. Tommy looked away, shaking his head in frustration, unwilling but unable to argue further. Luca held Elena's gaze longer. "You might not come back," Elena answered without the slightest pause. "I haven't come back from anything, Luca. I've only survived." He exhaled slowly and rose to his feet. "We begin at 9 tomorrow night. The car will wait behind the old warehouse. Surveillance team splits into 2 groups, one on the roof, one at the East Pier. I'll be the closest to you. If there's even a hint of trouble, I'm going in." Elena stood as well. "No, only go in when Victor arrives. I want him to see you." She walked out of the room without looking back. Each step felt as though she were walking deeper into a familiar abyss, except this time, she wasn't falling into it, she was luring the monster out. In her palm, the tiny tracking device Tommy had placed there glowed faintly. Tomorrow night, the past would no longer be something she ran from. It would be the fire she used to burn everything down. Night winds swept along the Red Hook Pier, carrying the salt of the sea and a cold that cut straight to the bone. Shipping containers towered in silent stacks, forming a maze where shadows clung to every corner. It was exactly 11:30 when Elena was shoved out of the rusted truck with fake plates. Her wrists were bound with zip ties, her hair loose and tangled, a trace of dried blood staining her lip, but her eyes were burning with a defiance that couldn't be extinguished. 2 men escorted her toward the warehouse near the dock, the same one Victor used for his final inspections before transport. Everything unfolded exactly according to plan, until a sleek black SUV rolled through a side lane and stopped at the warehouse door. A tall man stepped out, his silver hair combed back, his tailored black suit immaculate despite the wind. His face had not aged much, still sharp, still calculating, still wearing that veneer of control she remembered too well. Viktor Kovalenko. Elena did not blink as he approached. He stopped in front of her, studying her face inch by inch like a collector examining a relic he never expected to recover. He didn't speak at first. Only the soft tap of his shoes echoed on the concrete. Then he smiled, I'll give you credit, you're hard to kill, Elena, like a ghost. I heard you died near the Mexico border. She didn't answer. He tilted his head, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You shouldn't have come back. You don't belong in this world anymore. Elena let out a dry laugh. I never belonged in your world. Victor opened his mouth to respond when a sound echoed from the far end of the pier. A figure approached, heavy footsteps unhurried, unconcerned with being heard. Everyone turned. Victor narrowed his eyes as Luca Moretti emerged from the shadows, his long coat moving with the wind, his hands empty but his presence sharp enough to trigger both of Victor's men to grip their weapons. Victor's smile shifted into something warier. Moretti, I thought you stayed on your side of the river. Strange night to go wandering across the bridge, isn't it? Luca stopped just a few paces from him, his voice low and deliberate. I'm here to settle a debt. Victor arched a brow. I don't remember owing you anything. You don't owe. You stole. A person. A life. I came to take it back. Elena looked at Luca, something tightening in her chest. She hadn't expected him to come this soon, but she understood. Victor wouldn't be cornered without direct pressure. Victor stepped back, signaling his men to hold position. I don't know what game you're playing, Luca, but you're walking into dangerous territory. You expect me to believe you came out here for a woman who betrayed the system she served? No, Luca replied. I came because you think you're untouchable. He pulled a small device from his coat, a tiny recorder, its red light still blinking. This is your conversation with Anton 3 nights ago. Every word you said about eliminating Elena, about moving the shipment through Jersey, about bribing the Newark chief of police. Copies are already with federal agencies. Victor's jaw clenched, but he recovered quickly. I have lawyers. Good. I have 18 witnesses and 4 video files. Luca stepped forward again, now only 2 strides away. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to end this. A noise erupted behind them. The warehouse lights on the upper floor flickered, then burst into full brightness. Tommy's team was in place. From the roof, faint red dots appeared, laser sights trained on every man holding a weapon. Victor retreated one more step, and this time, his smile disappeared completely. Elena pulled her hands forward, snapping the zip ties with the small metal chip still clutched in her palm, its tracking light still blinking. You think I came here to beg, Victor? She said, her voice as cold as steel. No. I came to bury you. Victor turned, ready to shout a command, but it was already too late. A violent blast echoed behind them as the main warehouse door blew inward, and the assault team surged through. Gunfire erupted, deafening and bright, but amidst the smoke and debris, the target vanished. Capitalizing on the chaotic explosion, Victor escaped through a concealed tunnel beneath the warehouse floor, leaving his mercenaries behind to hold off the tactical team. The press briefing scheduled for that afternoon was abruptly postponed when Agent McAllister received an urgent call. The FBI's internal communication channels suddenly shifted to a Level 2 alert code, and within less than half an hour, the entire first floor of the security headquarters had been locked down. Elena was in the second interrogation room when Luca walked in, his face tightening as though a layer of frost had formed across it. In his hand was a tablet paused on a half-played video. He didn't need to say a word. Elena already knew something was terribly wrong. When the video resumed, the dim outline of a small room appeared, lit only enough to reveal a blonde little girl tied to a metal chair, her eyes blindfolded with a dark cloth, her mouth sealed with tape. The voice that followed was unmistakable. Victor. He sat right behind the child, his hand placed on her shoulder as though giving an interview for a late-night talk show. He stared directly into the camera, smiling faintly. I know you think it's over. I know you think Elena Navarro has won. But the game ends only when every single piece on the board is crushed. And I still have one piece left. This little girl is named Lucy, daughter of federal agent Thomas Gallagher, 7 years old. Went to school on Monday, vanished on Wednesday. You think I have nothing left to lose, but you're wrong. I still have enough to make any one of you pay. The video ended. No one in the room managed to breathe. Elena turned to Luca, her voice a low whisper, almost fading. He started to strike back. Luca nodded, his lips pressed into a hard line. And this time, he chose a hostage with public value. He doesn't need to hide anymore. He wants to force you to come out, not for justice, for revenge, for a child's life. An emergency meeting was convened. McAllister ordered Elena to withdraw from all operations related to Victor until the FBI could secure the hostage's safety. She refused immediately. Standing in the center of the conference room, in front of senior agents from every division, she rose to her feet, her eyes sharp as a blade, and her voice leaving no room for doubt. "If I back out, he'll kill her instantly. He's not bargaining. He wants revenge. He wants me. Then I'm the one he'll meet." Luca slammed his hand on the table. "No, this is no longer just your battle." Elena turned to him, and for the first time since the day they met, her eyes weren't trembling but burning with anger. "Not a battle, Luca. A child's life. And I won't let anyone else get dragged into this mud because I refuse to walk back into hell." McAllister reviewed the files, then ordered the tactical unit to prepare a rescue plan for Lucy. But Elena knew that once Victor prepared something so precise, he wouldn't keep the hostage anywhere easy to locate. She requested the last 3 days of GPS data, cell tower pings, and citywide camera footage, filtering all rented vehicles using fake identities linked to Victor's old connections. Among thousands of lines of data, a traffic camera near an abandoned industrial zone in northern Jersey caught a silver truck with a fake plate previously seen in a trafficking case 6 months earlier. She pointed at it. "He's keeping her there." Luca looked at the map, then at her. "If you go, I'm going with you." Elena nodded. "But this time, there is no backup. We go in once, and we end it once." Luca didn't ask anything else. By the time their car left headquarters, dusk had fallen. The first rain of the season poured against the windshield like a quiet warning. Inside Elena's chest, something heavy as stone, cold as steel, settled deeper with each passing mile. She knew Victor didn't just want her dead. He wanted her to choose, truth or a life. But this time, she would not let him choose for her. The rain hadn't stopped when their car halted before the abandoned industrial zone in northern Jersey. The red brick buildings were draped in moss, their rusted steel doors hanging half open like the jaws of old beasts in hibernation, hiding an unnatural silence within. No dogs barking, no passing cars, only the steady fall of rain and the wind striking loose sheets of metal, making them clang like the instruments of an execution. Elena tightened her grip on the knife hidden beneath her sleeve, her eyes scanning the surroundings with the precision of a survival-trained machine. Luca stood behind her, Glock loaded, watching every shifting shadow near the containers. They split up, Luca circling behind to reach the control room, Elena approaching the main entrance where a faint light flickered and the smell of oil seeped through the cracks. She knew Victor wouldn't post guards outside. His arrogance ran too deep. He wanted her to walk in on her own, willingly stepping into his lair as proof of his dominance. The steel door opened without a sound. Elena stepped inside. A dim, single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting thin light across the room, and at the center sat Victor, on a wooden chair, as though he'd been waiting for her. Behind him, Lucy was tied to a steel pillar, still blindfolded, her head bowed, her chest rising and falling in small, trembling breaths. Elena stopped 5 steps away, her hand hidden in her coat. Victor smiled, the kind of smile one might offer at a black tie event, not at the edge of violence. "You actually came. I was beginning to think you'd send someone else to cry on your behalf." She didn't answer, her eyes locked on his face, every scar, every cold crease. "I didn't think you'd risk this much," he said, his voice slithering across the cement floor. "But I'm glad. Because I'll end this story exactly the way I started it. You and me, Elena." The ground felt like it was vibrating beneath them, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. Elena drew a slow breath, stepping closer. "I didn't come to negotiate. I came to end this." Victor smirked. "With what? Loyalty?" I shattered. "That little belief in justice of yours 3 years ago. You have no one left, nowhere to return to." She took another step. "But I still have myself." When only 3 steps separated them, she stopped. Victor rose and walked toward her, unhurried, as though entering a waltz. But he didn't expect how quickly her hand moved. In a single breath, the small blade slipped from her sleeve and drove straight into his side. Victor's eyes widened, his body freezing in a shock of pure pain. Elena tightened her grip and pushed deeper. She looked him directly in the eyes, no fear left in hers. "You captured me, tortured me, killed my friend, but you didn't kill me. And that was your only mistake." She pulled the knife out as swiftly as she had plunged it in, stepping back. Victor staggered, but didn't fall. His hand reached for the gun at his waistband exactly when Luca burst in through the side door, firing a shot that struck Victor's hand, sending the weapon skidding across the floor. 2 more shots echoed as Luca cut down the guards rushing in from the hallway. Elena rushed to Lucy, slicing the ropes free, removing the blindfold and tape. The girl shook uncontrollably but alive, her eyes wide with terror. "You're safe now," Elena whispered, voice trembling. "You're safe, sweetheart." As she lifted Lucy into her arms, Luca held Victor pinned to the wall, blood streaking onto the cracked concrete. Elena looked back at him one last time. "This is the last light you'll ever see as a free man, Victor. Every door you think you can open, from now on, leads only to hell." And as they walked out of that room, the distant wail of FBI sirens rising through the rain, Elena knew the war had begun long ago, but now, finally, she was the one holding the blade. The wail of tactical sirens rose from the distance, but it could not drown out the gunfire that erupted across the abandoned industrial yard. As Elena carried Lucy toward the main exit, the first hail of bullets ripped across the wall beside her, brick dust exploding into the air, while the raw mix of gunpowder and burning metal swallowed every breath. 2 of Victor's men on the upper floor had managed to send out an alert, pulling in a full squad armed to the teeth. She knew this was the last push, a desperate attempt to reclaim Victor or wipe out everyone who had dared to touch him. Elena knelt, tucking Lucy behind the shadow of a metal pallet, placing a steady hand on the trembling little girl's shoulder while her terrified eyes stretched wide. "Stay right here. Don't move, not even a step, until someone wearing a vest marked with the letters FBI comes to get you, do you hear me?" Lucy nodded, hugging her knees, pressing her face into them as though she wished she could disappear. Elena turned just as Luca fired 3 sharp shots down the hallway, dropping 2 advancing gunmen. He signaled for her to fall back toward the northern exit where backup was closing in. But an explosion roared from the opposite side. A grenade detonated, sealing off the passage, the shockwave rattling the metal beams overhead as thick smoke swallowed the corridor and left Elena stunned for a breath. When her hearing steadied and the world sharpened again, Luca was gone from sight. She pushed through the clouded air, following the sound of shouting and gunfire until she found him pinned by 2 attackers, one wrenching his arm while the other raised a gun to his chest. Without hesitation, she drew the small knife from her hip and lunged. The first strike buried deep into the muscle of the gunman's arm, ripping a scream from him as his weapon clattered to the ground. The second man spun toward her, but Luca had already twisted low, sweeping his legs and slamming him onto the concrete. Elena grabbed the fallen gun and fired 2 precise rounds. She hauled Luca to his feet. He staggered, blood running down his left side. The bullet had grazed him, but the wound was deep and angry. She draped his arm over her shoulder, half lifting, half dragging him toward the hall. Outside, tactical units were pouring in, boots pounding, commanding voices ricocheting against the steel walls. But the remaining gunmen were not ready to surrender. From the rooftop, Victor's sniper unleashed a wild burst of shots. Elena traced the angle instantly and yanked Luca into the shadow of the wall, her heart slamming hard against her ribs. She raised her gun, steadying her breath as she measured the sniper's hiding point through gaps in the steel trusses, then fired 3 clean shots. A scream fractured the air before the body tumbled from the corrugated roof like a heavy sack hitting the ground. She pulled Luca onward as agents took down the stragglers behind them. One last man charged from a side entrance, shouting as he reached for a small bomb strapped to his chest, ready to kill them both. Elena had no time to aim. With the last of her strength, she hurled her final knife straight into his throat. He collapsed, dead before his fingers reached the trigger. Her breath tore in and out, her hands tingling, her vision swimming from smoke and blood. When they finally burst through the main doors, the sweeping lights of ambulances and helicopters washed over them like the first light after a long nightmare. 2 agents rushed to take Luca, lifting him onto a stretcher while Elena stood still for a brief, suspended moment, taking in the shattered concrete, the scattered shell casings, the bodies cooling in the dim morning air. Lucy was escorted out moments later. The girl threw herself into the arms of a female agent, clinging to her in silent desperation. Elena watched the scene, and her chest tightened not from exhaustion, but because, for the first time in years, she had saved a life not by luck, but by choice. Luca was being loaded into the ambulance. Before the doors shut, He reached out, gripping her hand. Their eyes met, and though not a single word was spoken, Elena understood that if she had not fought, if she had not walked straight into a storm of bullets, the man on that stretcher would already be gone, and she would never have forgiven herself. As the ambulance pulled away under the sweep of red lights, Elena remained standing in the old shipyard, her hands stained with blood, her left shoulder torn open, but her gaze no longer trembling. The war was over, and she was still standing. Dawn was breaking when Anton was dragged out from the underground room behind the factory where he had hidden like a cornered rat. Agent Tommy and 2 others had pinned him after picking up his heat signature through the drones sweeping the area. Anton did not resist. He knew his time had run out. When Elena approached, dirt streaked across her face, her hair stiff with dried blood, her eyes unchanged since she ran into the battle cold, focused, and unforgiving. Anton sneered, his wrists bound, kneeling between 2 agents holding him steady. "You really think you've won? Without Victor, there are still dozens more. Give me a few weeks and I could rebuild the entire network." Elena crouched in front of him, her gaze locked with his. "I don't need a few weeks. I only need 1 recording." She pulled out a small audio device and pressed play. Victor's voice filled the broken yard. "Anton, if I disappear, you know what to erase. The client lists, the offshore accounts, and the clip of Gallagher." Anton's eye twitched. Elena's voice dropped low, sharper than steel. "You don't need to rebuild anything, because everything is already in our hands. Your entire system was taken down at 10 o'clock tonight. Now I want you to decide how you want to be remembered. As a coward dying in the dark, or as the first one to name every last man still hiding." Anton barked a laugh, then coughed hard as blood filled his throat. "You can't touch me. I know how your system works. I used to be part of it." Elena tilted her head, her voice soft but colder than winter water. "Yes, you used to be part of the system. So was I. But I stayed. And you sold your soul. Now this is your one chance to save what's left of yourself." His laughter died. Silence crept in, and for the first time, fear pricked across his face like a thin shadow. When the agents hauled him away, his arrogance had drained to nothing. Elena turned and saw Lucy wrapped in a blanket on a folding cot at the back of the ambulance, a bowl of soup nearly empty in her lap. When Elena approached, Lucy lifted her head. "You really came to save me?" Elena smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I promised, didn't I? And I never break a promise." Lucy squeezed her hand. "Will my dad come?" Elena nodded. "He's on his way. Your mom, too. You're safe now." From a distance, camera crews and reporters were already gathering behind the police barriers. McAllister ordered a full media blackout, but Elena knew silence would never last long. This case would shake more than the halls of the FBI. It would ripple across every federal investigation unit. Standing amid the wreckage, watching the first pale line of morning cut across the horizon, she saw a CBS reporter slip through the barricade, holding out a recorder. "Do you have anything to say to those still hiding, Agent Navarro?" Elena faced the camera without blinking. "If you can still hear this, know one thing. Children are not pieces on your board. We will come for you. We will not stop, and the truth always finds its way back." She turned away and walked toward the ambulance where Lucy waited. Overhead, the first light of a new day began to break through the gray clouds, a quiet reminder that everything buried in darkness must one day return to the light. The penthouse sat on the 43rd floor of an old building in Brooklyn, where the city lights stretched out beneath them like a quiet ribbon of stars. Inside, the silence was so complete that the only sounds were their own breathing and the slow, patient ticking of a wall clock. Elena sat by the large window with one knee pulled up, a glass of untouched wine resting in her hand. Her hair still carried the faint trace of smoke and dust, and the loose shirt of Lucas she wore hid the wounds that had not yet healed. Outside, the New York night seemed blissfully unaware that in less than 24 hours, an underground empire had been torn apart, a child had been saved, and a woman had found her way back to herself. Lucas stepped out from the bathroom, the black shirt clinging to his side stained with dried blood, though the wound beneath had been carefully wrapped. He stopped behind her, saying nothing, simply watching the reflection of the two of them in the glass. Elena spoke first, her voice low and husky. "I thought that once this was over, I would feel lighter. But now all I feel is empty. Luca moved closer, resting a hand on the back of her chair. You've walked to the end of the truth. That isn't emptiness. It's the silence after the storm. Elena lifted the glass for a small sip, then set it down. I lived 3 years without a name, without a place, without even the right to exist in the system I once gave everything to. And last night, I chose not to return. Luca sat across from her, his gaze steady on hers. You chose not to return to what betrayed you. That's not loss, Elena. That's freedom. But then what? She whispered. Who am I if I'm no longer an agent? No longer someone chasing justice the way the world defines it. I have nothing to rebuild from, Luca. Only broken pieces. Luca stayed silent for a long time. Then he reached into his jacket and placed a folded document on the table. A transfer of ownership for a small security company in Queens. The listed representative was E.N. You don't have to start again from ashes. You only have to start from yourself. Elena picked it up, her fingers trembling. When did you do this? Luca smiled softly. The day you chose to go, after Lucy. I knew you wouldn't go back to being a shadow in the system. But I also knew you didn't belong to the silence either. She looked at him, and for the first time her eyes allowed themselves to soften. And you? Where will you go? Luca rose and sat beside her. Wherever you are, that's where I choose. But if you don't want that, I'll leave. Elena turned toward the night, yet her hand had already found his. No, enough. I've lost too much to keep pushing people away. I'm tired, Luca. Tired of being strong alone. He closed his hand around hers, offering no words. They sat like that for a long time, letting the wind slip through the window seams and the soft glow of streetlights paint their faces with a tenderness New York rarely offered. In that stillness, Elena understood that the choice was no longer between running or staying. It was between existing and living. And she chose to live, not for the past, not for vengeance, but for the life quietly unfolding in front of her. Morning at Greenwood Cemetery always carried a strange kind of light, as if even the sun bowed its head before stories left unfinished. Elena stood before an old stone marker, weeds brushing its base, her long brown coat stirring gently in the wind. The name carved into the granite weighed on her chest like lead. Jacob Morales, partner, mentor, the man who had died in an ambush while protecting her from Victor 3 years earlier. In her hand was a small, worn piece of paper, a letter she had written but never sent, scribbled during the night she vanished from the system, written while lying between blood-stained walls and distant screams. Now she read it aloud, her voice steady and low, as if Jacob were still somewhere nearby listening. Jacob, it took me 3 years to understand why you never bowed to the dark. I used to wonder whether your death meant anything, when the system chose to ignore it. But now I know that sacrifice doesn't need recognition to be true. It only needs to be continued. She placed the letter at the base of the stone, her hand trembling. I'm not an agent anymore, but I'm still the person you believed I could be. I saved a child, ended a network, faced myself. The fires don't haunt my sleep anymore. The screams don't echo. I only hear your last words. Run, Elena, don't look back. But I did look back. For me, for you, for everything unfinished. A cold breeze swept through her hair, but it no longer made her flinch. Elena stepped back, letting her eyes linger on the final line carved into the stone. Those who die for truth never truly leave. As she walked out of the cemetery beneath the towering trees, no darkness followed her. The wounds on her body had begun to heal, and the ones in her heart no longer bled. That afternoon she picked up her journal again. On the first page she wrote a single sentence. Today, I forgave myself. Luca returned at sunset, carrying a paper bag with 2 toasted sandwiches and hot coffee. He found her sitting on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life like an unfinished painting. They didn't speak at first, the air filled only with wind and the warm scent of coffee. Finally, Elena turned to him, her eyes free from the layers of old defenses. I've left the past behind. I don't know what tomorrow will be, but I know I won't let the past decide my steps anymore. Luca nodded and brushed his fingers against hers. I never doubted that. You're the only person I've ever known who can walk out of hell without letting it turn your heart to stone. Elena smiled, soft and unburdened for the first time in years. The war had taken everything from her, her name, her career, her trust, the people she loved. But it had also given her something no one else could. The chance to begin again. Not as an agent, not as a survivor defined by wounds, but as herself. Elena Navarro, a woman who endured, a woman who fought, and now a woman free. 1 week after everything ended, Elena stood before the mirror in her new apartment in the West Village, where the morning sun spilled across the wooden floor in gentle ribbons. She wore a simple white shirt, her hair tied neatly back, no trace left of the woman who once crawled through darkness fighting for every breath. On her left wrist, the scar still remained, unhidden, a reminder that every step in life leaves its mark, but it is the path we choose afterward that defines who we are. She looked into her own eyes and, for the first time in 3 years, did not look away. No hiding, no lies, no fear. The reflection staring back was someone who had learned to forgive the past, accept the pain, and believe in tomorrow. Today, she would open the doors of a new center for victims and children of human trafficking. A small hand-painted sign hung out front. Every soul deserves to be heard, to be healed, and to live truthfully. The name of the founder beneath it was not an agent number or a coded badge, but simply Elena Navarro. She chose to live forward not for vengeance and not for recognition, but to do what those who had fallen never had another chance to do. Every child saved, every woman protected, was a quiet piece of the journey she would never regret taking. Luca remained by her side, not as a bodyguard or a ghost from her past, but as part of the present she chose. They rarely spoke of what happened. They simply lived, honestly and quietly. Sometimes, when the yellow streetlights brushed the pavement below, they sat together on the balcony, without mentioning Victor or the sleepless nights. They understood that peace was not the absence of darkness, but the choice to stop letting the darkness decide how they lived. Elena's story ends here, but her journey does not. Some stories don't need a period to close. They only need a comma so they can continue. And what about you? Have you ever lived through something that made you lose yourself? Have you ever felt as though your whole life had become one long wound with no exit? If you have, I hope this story touches something deep within you. I hope it helps you understand that no matter how thick the darkness becomes, a single spark of courage is enough to begin again. If this story brought you any comfort or meaning, please leave a comment and let us know. We would truly love to hear your feelings, your real, honest feelings. Did this story touch something in your life? Did it help you name a pain that had remained silent? Share it with us. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with someone you love if you think they, too, might need a story like this. We will continue bringing heartfelt stories filled with truth and humanity every day, because we believe good stories deserve to be heard. Thank you for walking with us through this journey. I wish you good health, a joyful life, and a peaceful heart. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you in the next video.